Have you ever thought about how powerful Professor Minerva McGonagall really was? What if the movies left out some of the most incredible details about her life? In today's video, you will discover secrets about McGonagall's strength, past, and the moments that never made it to the screen. The Harry Potter series is full of unforgettable characters. But even among them, one stands out: strict, brilliant, and endlessly loyal. Minerva McGonagall wasn't just a professor. She was a force to be reckoned with. Students feared her, yet respected her deeply. Her colleagues trusted her judgment. And when the moment called for it, she became a warrior. But how did she rise to such prominence? What made her one of the most skilled witches of her time? And what moments from her story were left out of the films? Minerva McGonagall was born in Scotland to a Muggle priest and a witch. Her mother hid her magic for years, fearing her husband's reaction. When the truth came out, it created a rift in the family. They still loved each other, but trust was never the same. Young Minerva grew up watching her mother struggle between two worlds, longing for the magical life she left behind, while her father wrestled with the idea that his wife was, in his eyes, a witch. At Hogwarts, McGonagall immediately drew attention. The Sorting Hat took an unusually long time deciding between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw. In the end, her bravery won out. She became one of Gryffindor's brightest students, excelling in Transfiguration and earning a reputation as a strict but fair leader. Her personal life was marked by heartbreak. After graduating, she fell deeply in love with a Muggle man. When he proposed, she almost said yes, but she knew that marriage would mean giving up her magical ambitions. She made the painful choice to walk away, leaving behind love for a future in the wizarding world. McGonagall's first job was at the Ministry of Magic, where she quickly gained recognition. Her superior, Elphinstone Urquhart, admired her talent. But London bored her. She longed for Hogwarts. When Dumbledore offered her a teaching position, she accepted immediately. Years later, Elphinstone proposed to her. She refused. Her heart still belonged to the Muggle man she had left behind. Only much later, after years of loneliness, did she finally say yes. Their happiness was short-lived. Just 3 years into their marriage, Elphinstone died from a rare plant's venom. It was a devastating loss, one she never fully recovered from. As a professor, McGonagall was both respected and feared. She was a strict disciplinarian, but she cared deeply for her students. She upheld the rules like her father, yet possessed the sharp wit and talent of her mother. When Voldemort rose to power, she played a crucial role in resisting him. Though she never officially joined the Order of the Phoenix, she worked closely with Aurors, gathering intelligence on Death Eater movements. During the reign of Dolores Umbridge, McGonagall was one of the few who dared to stand up to her. In one legendary moment, Umbridge interrupted her lesson, trying to assert dominance. Without hesitation, McGonagall shut her down with a sharp remark, leaving the entire class in stunned silence. And then came the Battle of Hogwarts. McGonagall led the school's defense, casting powerful enchantments to shield the castle. She single-handedly animated Hogwarts stone guardians, commanding them to fight. In the chaos of the final battle, she even faced Voldemort himself. She couldn't defeat him, but she didn't back down either. After the war, she took her rightful place as Hogwarts headmistress, serving until old age. But just how powerful was she? McGonagall was one of the greatest transfiguration masters, second only to Dumbledore. She was an animagus, capable of transforming into a cat at will. She used this ability to spy on Death Eaters. Her Patronus was also a cat, and she could summon multiple Patronuses at once, something few wizards could do. She was skilled in combat magic. During an attempt to arrest Hagrid, 4 Aurors attacked her at once. They only managed to bring her down by sheer numbers. Many believe that in a fair duel none of them could have bested her. Her most impressive feat? Activating Hogwarts' legendary protection spells, a task so advanced it was typically reserved for headmasters. McGonagall wasn't just a professor, she was a legend, a fierce protector of Hogwarts, a woman who stood against darkness time and time again. Her story is one of strength, sacrifice, and an unwavering sense of justice. And yet, despite everything she did, the movies only scratched the surface of who she really was. Minerva McGonagall was a figure of immense authority at Hogwarts. She walked the halls with a dignity that demanded respect. Her stern expression rarely softened, her lips pressed into a firm line of control. Students feared her, admired her, but few truly knew her. Behind that rigid composure was there a secret she never shared, a past that she kept locked away, even from Dumbledore? Rumours swirled among the older staff members. Some whispered that she had once been in love. Others believed she had suffered a betrayal so deep that it had shaped the woman she became. But no one dared to ask. McGonagall was a fortress. Albus Dumbledore had been one of the only people she trusted. His office was the only place where her strict mask sometimes slipped. On rare occasions, late at night, she would sit in the chair across from him, eyes distant. "There are things, Albus, that even magic cannot mend," she had once said softly, fingers tightening around her teacup. He had nodded, not pressing further. He understood loss. But hers? Hers was buried deeper than the castle dungeons. Before she became the formidable professor of transfiguration, before she took up the title of deputy headmistress, Minerva had been a young witch with a future gleaming ahead. She had been bright, passionate, but passion is a dangerous thing. It had led her down a path she rarely spoke of. Only one student ever asked about her past, dared to probe where others had not. It was Hermione Granger. In her final year at Hogwarts, Hermione had stayed behind after class, curiosity burning in her gaze. "Professor," she had said hesitantly, "have you ever... before teaching, did you—" The sharp look McGonagall gave her made her fall silent. The professor's lips thinned, then she turned away. "Some pasts are best left where they belong, Miss Granger." The truth. There had been love once. A name she had never uttered in the halls of Hogwarts. Dougal McGregor, a muggle. A man she had loved deeply, recklessly, against all logic. He had proposed to her. She had wanted to say yes, but how could she, knowing what she was? Knowing that a life with him meant keeping half of herself hidden forever? She had left him, vanishing from his life like a ghost. Years later, she heard he had married another, had children, and she had thrown herself into work, into magic, into discipline. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, she wondered, what if there were other losses? During the First Wizarding War, Minerva had been more than a teacher. She had been a soldier. She had fought alongside the Order of the Phoenix, standing in the shadows of giants like Moody and Dumbledore. She had duelled, she had risked her life, and she had watched friends die. Elphinstone Urquhart, a colleague and old friend, had been one of them. He had loved her once, proposed to her too, years after Dougal, and that time she had said yes. They had been happy for a time, until a cursed snake ended it. He had died in St. Mungo's, his hand gripping hers. "I thought we'd have more time," he had whispered. But they hadn't. That was the thing about Minerva McGonagall. She had spent her life losing people. She had loved and lost again and again, until she had built walls so high that no one could scale them. Even in the aftermath of the Battle of Hogwarts, when victory had been won at a terrible price, she had not allowed herself to mourn openly. Not even when she saw the bodies of fallen students, those she had sworn to protect. She had walked through the great hall, silent, her face unreadable. But if one looked closely, they might have seen the way her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses, the way her throat moved as she swallowed grief. And there were other secrets, darker ones. It was said that during Voldemort's first rise to power, McGonagall had been targeted, not as a victim, as a potential ally. The Death Eaters had seen her skill, her intelligence, and had tried to recruit her. Not directly, no one was foolish enough to approach her that way. But there had been threats, whispers sent through the Flu network, letters that arrived with no sender's name. She had never spoken about it, but Dumbledore had known. Once, when the subject of the Death Eaters came up in a staff meeting, he had glanced at her. A brief look filled with something unspoken. She had met his gaze, then turned away. The past was past. Students had always feared her temper, but they never saw the nights she spent awake, worrying about them, about Hogwarts, about the future. When Dolores Umbridge took over the school, McGonagall had been pushed to her limit. She had seen Hogwarts turn into something unrecognizable, had seen her students tortured, had nearly been killed herself. And yet she had never wavered. But there was one night, long after the students had gone to bed, when she had stood before the fireplace in her office, staring at the flames. "If I could burn this whole system down and start again," she had murmured, "I would." No one had heard her. No one, except perhaps the castle itself. Her relationship with Severus Snape had always been complicated. They had respected each other, but there had been tension. Minerva had never fully trusted him, not even when Dumbledore vouched for him. And yet in the end, when the truth was revealed, when she learned of his sacrifice, she had stood before his body longer than any other. "You fool!" she had whispered, voice barely audible. "You foolish, brave man." McGonagall had no children of her own, but in many ways Hogwarts had been her family. She had been its protector, its guardian, and yet, even in her old age, she had moments where she wondered, what would it have been like to have a daughter, a son, to have a life beyond these stone walls? But those thoughts were fleeting. Regret was a useless thing. There were things she had never told anyone. That she had once danced barefoot in the rain with a man she loved. That she had a letter from her mother tucked away in a drawer, the ink fading but the words still clear. That sometimes, late at night, she sat in the empty Transfiguration classroom, running her fingers over the worn wooden desks, remembering students who had come and gone, voices that had once filled the room, but would never again. Minerva McGonagall was not just a teacher, not just a witch. She was a woman who had lived through wars, through heartbreak, through loss, a woman who had sacrificed more than most would ever know, and she had done it without complaint, without asking for sympathy, because that was who she was. And yet sometimes, when the castle was silent and she was alone in her office, she would close her eyes and remember. A young girl full of hope, a love lost, a life chosen